They said young Buck's career was over, that his best days were behind him, but what they didn't know is that behind the fame, the hits, and the G-Unit glory, there's a story of betrayal, shootings, millions lost, and battles with 50 Cent that almost destroyed him completely. From the streets of Nashville to the biggest stages in hip-hop, Buck's rise and fall was anything but ordinary, and the truth, it's darker, crazier, and more shocking than you ever imagined. And honestly, I think Buck's era is over. His career, done? That line from 50 Cent hit like a brick, because soon after, Buck filed for bankruptcy, got slammed with IRS debt, and even landed in jail for probation violations. Watching his career collapse was like slow-motion heartbreak, but the story behind it all, way darker than anyone ever imagined. To really understand Buck, you have to go back to where it all started, the streets of Nashville, Tennessee. David Brown, later known as Young Buck, didn't have it easy growing up. He was always on the move, switching neighborhoods as a kid. From Seafright in North Nashville to J.C. Napier projects in South Nashville, and then the South 7 projects, Buck had already seen the city from top to bottom by the age of 8. Those early years weren't easy. He moved constantly, adapting to new neighborhoods, new faces, and new dangers. Each street had its own rhythm, its own rules, and by navigating them, Buck learned lessons most kids only hear about in stories. He saw firsthand the challenges of poverty, the temptations of the streets, and the daily grind that kept families just surviving. That environment forced him to grow up fast. It wasn't just survival that shaped him, it was observation. Buck absorbed the stories, struggles, and triumphs around him. Every conversation on a corner, every block he walked, every person he met added a layer to his understanding of life. These experiences would later become the backbone of his music, giving it a raw, unfiltered authenticity that set him apart from other artists. The street taught him not only resilience but also strategy, how to read people, navigate conflict, and recognize opportunities. Even as a child, Buck understood the value of hustle. He saw his parents and neighbors finding ways to make ends meet, and realized he would have to do the same if he wanted more than just survival. By the time he started freestyling and writing rhymes, the streets had already given him a unique voice grounded in reality, pain, and ambition. That early exposure didn't just shape Buck's personality, it became the fire behind his artistry, pushing him to turn his experiences into music that people could feel, relate to, and respect. In many ways, Nashville's streets were his first studio, teaching him lessons no classroom ever could. From a young age, Buck was hustling any way he could, pumping gas for tips, cutting lawns, washing cars. He did it all to put a little money in his pocket and help out at home. But music was his escape. It wasn't just a dream, it was a lifeline. He freestyled with his day ones, battled anyone who dared step up, and slowly started building a buzz in Nashville's underground hip-hop scene. And here's where things get wild. Buck and his friends stumbled upon a BGC D-Chopper City, and on the back was a number for Cash Money Records. These kids, barely knowing what they were doing, picked up the phone. They told Cash Money they wanted to book the label for a $5,000 show in Nashville. Somehow, it almost happened, but what really mattered was what came next. Meeting everyone at Cash Money changed Buck's life. Birdman challenged him to freestyle against Lil Wayne. Their back and forth impressed Birdman so much that he brought Buck down to New Orleans, ready to put him on the path to signing a record deal. At just 14, Buck made a life-changing decision. He dropped out of school to chase music full-time. Whether or not it was the right move, it showed his hunger. Music wasn't a side hustle, it was everything. But the journey wasn't smooth. Buck spent 3 to 4 years with Cash Money, and none of his music was released. While Lil Wayne, Juvenile, and others were hitting the charts, Buck stayed on the sidelines. His only visible work, a cameo in Big Timer's Big Ballin' music video. By 1999, he'd had enough and returned to Nashville to do things on his own terms. Even though his time at Cash Money felt like a setback, it wasn't wasted. He learned the ropes of the music business and made connections with people like DJ Paul from 3 6 Mafia and Juvenile, relationships that would later be crucial. Back home, Buck linked up with his local crew and started grinding independently. On August 22, 2000, he dropped Thug Until the End with his homie DT. The project shocked the game. It charted on Billboard number 34 on the US R&B charts and number 17 on the US independent charts. For an independent release from an unknown Nashville rapper, that was huge. Buck moved roughly $10,000 in units, not massive by major label standards, but impressive for a self-made indie artist. More importantly, it proved there was a real audience for his music. Then reality hit hard. Buck was caught between the streets and music, and the streets almost ended him. During a home invasion, he got shot once in the arm, twice in the upper thigh. That was a wake-up call. He realized that if he kept living that life, he'd either end up dead or in jail. That day changed everything. Buck committed fully to music, leaving the streets behind. From that moment, it was all studio grind, all hustle, all heart. No more distractions, just the music, and the chance to build a legacy from the chaos he'd survived. Just when Buck needed a break the most. One came through an old connection. DJ Paul from 3 6 Mafia, a longtime fan of Buck's bars and pen game, heard about the shooting and reached out. He had Project Pat pick Buck up in Nashville and bring him to Memphis to record. Those sessions led to Buck's first major album placement on 3 6 Mafia's When the Smoke Clears, 666. This was the shot in the arm Buck needed. The exposure that would open doors, but he still didn't sign with 3 6 Mafia. He returned to Nashville, grinding independently, now with more connections and visibility than ever. But hold up, the story of how Buck joined That's wild. Birdman, his old Cash Money link, reached out again. Things had changed since Buck's first run with Cash Money in the late 90s. The label had grown luxury cars, bigger offices, the whole operation had leveled up. Birdman wanted Buck to join a new group called Headbuses. Buck flew back to New Orleans, but history started repeating itself. After waiting a week with no paperwork and zero progress, frustration set in. He wasn't that naive 14-year-old anymore, he had responsibilities back home and no time to sit around. Then fate intervened. Juvenile showed up at the Cash Money offices and was shocked to see Buck still waiting. At the time, Juvenile was dealing with his own issues with Cash Money. He offered Buck a way out. Want to get up out of here for a minute? Buck took that ride, and that was the start of his career with Juvenile. He officially became part of Juvenile's UTP record label. But here's the genius part. Buck never actually signed the contract. He took it home, kept it under his bed, and waited. Smart move. During this period, Buck dropped 2 projects. Born to be a Thug on October 10, 2002, and a UTP Players compilation on October 8, 2002. Technically, he wasn't signed, but he was learning the game. He'd seen Cash Money's tactics, and knew Juvenile was in his own mess. So stability wasn't guaranteed. Juvenile even told Buck to take a better offer if it came along. That offer came sooner than expected. Touring with Juvenile, their bus stopped in New York in 2002. 50 Cent was blowing up the city, was buzzing about him. Buck pushed to get 50 on the bus, and it happened. But 50 was recording with Juvenile, not Buck. Buck didn't waste the moment. He played some solo tracks for Lloyd Banks and Tony Yayo, who were also on the bus. One track caught Lloyd Banks's ear. He took it to 50, who jumped on it. That track became Bloodhound on the iconic Get Rich or Die Trying album. While A Little Bit of Everything was technically the first release with all 4, Bloodhound introduced Buck to the mainstream at the time. 50 Cent couldn't offer a deal. He wasn't signed yet himself, but he never forgot Buck. When UTP fell apart, fate stepped in again. Just a week later, 50 called Buck. "We want Bloodhound on the album, $20,000. Mixed by Eminem and Dr. Dre. Fly to LA, meet us, and officially join Own It, for Buck, who'd already endured countless setbacks. This was a dream come true. The big break every rapper hopes for. Everything he'd been grinding for, all the hustling, struggles, and near misses, had led to this moment. Buck's first big move with G-Unit was Bloodhound on 50 Cent's Get Rich or Die Trying, but 50 was strategic. He didn't drop Buck's solo album right away. Instead, he introduced him to the world as part of the squad with the G-Unit group album Beg for Mercy. Beg for Mercy was a monster. It peaked at number 2 on the Billboard 200, moved 377,000 units in its first week, and has now sold over 2.7 million copies in the US, nearing Diamond worldwide. Buck had officially arrived main stage. Big lights, the whole hood watching. Following G-Unit's blueprint, Buck dropped a mixtape, Welcome to the Hood, on May 31, 2004, hosted by DJ Who Kid. It set the stage for his solo debut. On July 2, 2004, the first single, Let Me In featuring 50 Cent, dropped and hit number 34 on the Billboard Hot 100. Then, on August 24, 2004, Buck released his debut album, Straight Outta C. It debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200, sold 361,000 copies in its first week, and went platinum. The second single, Shorty, Wanna Ride, became his highest charting solo single, peaking at number 17. But tensions emerged. 50 Cent and their shared manager, Shaw Money XL, started having serious issues. 50 told the G-Unit members to cut ties with Shaw Money. Everyone complied. Except Buck. Buck's loyalty to Shaw Money was unshakable. He was Shaw Money's best man at his wedding and considered him more than just a manager, he was family. Buck couldn't betray someone who had done nothing wrong to him personally. 50 Cent took this as disloyalty, and resentment built quickly. Banks, Yayo, and 50 promoted their projects together. But Buck and Shaw Money were left to handle his releases independently. Buck believes this lack of full G-Unit support contributed to Buck the World underperforming. When it dropped on March 27, 2007, Buck the World debuted at number 3 on the Billboard 200 with 140,000 first-week sales. It went gold, but the singles I Know You Want Me and Get Buck didn't match the success of his debut. At the same time, 50 accused Buck of being friendly with all of his rivals The Game, Jadakiss, Fat Joe, Jim Jones, and others, which only fueled the growing tension. By 2008, things were spiraling for Buck. He clarified that he wasn't cozying up to 50's rivals. He was actually feeding 50 information about them, but 50 saw any contact as disloyalty. On top of that, 50 accused Buck of reckless spending, ignoring taxes, and claimed he'd paid Buck's taxes multiple times before Buck even realized he owed money. Sure enough, in 2008, Buck discovered he owed $300,000 to the IRS. That was just the tip of the iceberg. January started rough. Buck appeared at a show with Lil Wayne and Birdman, who openly told him to leave G-Unit and join Young Money, Cash Money. Buck seemed to agree on stage. 50 saw the footage and was furious. February brought more tension. G-Unit dropped a mixtape called Return of the Body Snatchers Volume 1, and Buck was nowhere to be found. Fans were confused, especially since he'd just appeared on Feel Goods with the Crew. Then came the event that would change everything. In March 2008, Buck and 50 had a private phone call unknown to the public. 50 secretly recorded it. For a brief moment, it seemed like things might be okay. Buck even appeared on tracks for the G-Unit mixtape Elephant in the Sand that month. But reconciliation was short-lived. On March 20, 2008, an old interview with Yo Raps surfaced, in which Buck complained about never receiving royalty checks. The timing couldn't have been worse. It looked like sabotage. Shaw Money XL tried to control the damage, pointing out that Buck had cleared over $10 million under 50's guidance. Then, on April 7, 2008, 50 Cent officially announced on Hot 97 that Buck was no longer part of G-Unit as a group, though he was still signed to G-Unit Records as a solo artist. A week later, 50 aired more grievances, even claiming Buck had a drug problem. Buck stayed quiet at first but eventually responded on May 12, 2008. With the track My Interview, addressing his ousting and the drug allegations. Things escalated in June. On June 15, Buck went on stage and shouted "Gun," a symbolic line in the sand. 2 days later, 50 released the full taped phone conversation, showing Buck crying and asking for help. Buck fired back immediately with the diss track, The Taped Conversation. On June 18, a remix with The Game dropped on June 21. And there were even plans for a collaborative mixtape called Worth More Than 50 Cent, which never came to fruition. When G-Unit released their second album, Terminate On Sight, on July 1, 2008, Buck was featured on only 4 tracks, reduced to guest status on his own Cruise project. For the rest of the year, he barely released music, as 50 allegedly blocked his ability to drop a solo album. By 2009, Buck pivoted to mixtapes, flooding the streets with raw, unfiltered music. Analysts and fans noticed that this was perhaps his hungriest, most authentic period. You could hear the struggle, desperation, and determination in every verse. He released Back for the Streets on April 11, 2009, followed by Back on My Buck on May 26. Tracks like I Want It All and I Got It, featuring Young Jeezy, showcased a rapper at his most focused and motivated. Yet, behind the music, Buck's personal and legal problems were mounting, creating a pressure cooker situation that would test him like never before. On August 3, 2010, the IRS raided Young Buck's house over $300,000 in unpaid taxes. During the raid, they found a hammer, and because Buck was a convicted felon from the 2004 Vibe Awards incident, he was charged, even though he insisted the hammer belonged to his licensed tour manager. Just 3 days later, Buck channeled the frustration into music, dropping My Campaign, turning a real-life struggle into bars. By August 19, 2010, Buck filed for Chapter 13 bankruptcy, but this move wasn't just about survival. It freed him from his Giant Records contract, giving him a chance to rebuild independently. On September 7, 2010, he dropped The Rehab, which debuted at number 55 on the Billboard 200 and sold over 6,400 copies in its first week. Not his peak, but a solid start for an indie release. Legal issues kept piling up. In March 2011, G-Unit Records sued Buck for $10 million. Yet late that year, there was a flicker of hope. 50 Cent tweeted at Buck, returning $250,000 to him. But the violence around him wasn't slowing down. On March 4, 2012, Buck survived a drive-by shooting outside a South Nashville club, though his girlfriend was hit in the shoulder. On July 13, 2012, Buck was sentenced to 18 months in prison for weapons charges. The following month, the IRS auctioned off his belongings: jewelry, studio equipment, everything, raising $53,000, a humiliating reminder of how far he had fallen. Buck officially turned himself in on August 6, 2012, and was released on October 2, 2013. Then the hip-hop world got shocked. Behind the scenes, 50 Cent had been repairing relationships with Lloyd Banks and Tony Yayo, and apparently thinking about Buck too. On June 1, 2014, at Hot 97 Summer Jam, 50 brought out all 3 original G-Unit members, Buck included, for an official reunion. They released 2 EPs, The Beauty of Independence, August 25, 2014, and The Beast is G-Unit, March 3, 2015. Fans were hyped. Buck went on a relentless grind, releasing his ambitious 10 series of mixtapes: 10 Bullets, 10 Bricks, 10 Pints, 10 Bot, and more between 2015 and 2018. But setbacks kept coming. On July 15, 2016, he was arrested for threatening to burn down his ex-girlfriend's apartment, and served 7 months in jail. In 2018, things seemed to be turning around. Buck dropped the single Can't Lose on March 30. Fire track, underappreciated by the masses. He announced a 3rd studio album, executive produced by 50 Cent and Dr. Dre, which had fans excited. But the relationship with 50 deteriorated again. 50 claimed Buck owed him over $300,000 and blocked any of Buck's releases. In 2019, leaked audio of Buck in a personal conversation went viral. 50 mercilessly mocked him online, posting homophobic content, and effectively ending any chance of another G-Unit reunion. In 2020, Buck filed for bankruptcy again, aiming to escape his contract and 50's lawsuits. After a long legal battle, he lost in 2023 and agreed to pay $200,690 of the alleged $250,000 debt. To cover debts, he liquidated assets worth around $105 million, spent $445,000 on legal fees, and left about $600,000 for creditors. In April 2025, Buck was arrested again for repeated violations of bond supervision related to a pending domestic assault case. He served 30 days and was released around May 12, 2025. His trial is now scheduled for January 12, 2026. Despite all this, Buck seems to be in a better place mentally and emotionally. He's active on social media, celebrating milestones like the 18th anniversary of Straight Outta Compton, and appears focused on building his legacy rather than dwelling on past drama.